in English and Putonghua. If you require interpretation, please collect your headset before entering the meeting. Thank you.
Me or him? Mr. Trump.
Ladies and gentlemen, our event is about to begin. Please take your seats and turn your phone onto silent mode. Thank you. Good afternoon. Please take your seats and turn your phone onto silent mode. Please note that today's program is on the record and open to the media. Tomorrow's program will be off the record, Chatham House rules, and closed to the media. Ladies and gentlemen, our event has begun. Thank you.
The Hong Kong Forum is a place where ideas, openness and debate are celebrated. We are supported by a community of global leaders who have all spoken at this annual meeting. They include former heads of state and government, Mary Robinson, Romano Prodi, Jean Chrétien, Yasuo Fukuda, Goh Chok Tong and Helen Clark. The Hong Kong Forum is a landmark event of the China-United States Exchange Foundation, also known as CUSEF, which is a non-profit founded by Hong Kong's first leader, Mr. Tung Chee-hwa. It was created in the compelling belief that two nations, the US and China, have the compassion and capacity to impact global good. It brings people together in divided times, and by building trust, it responds to the greatest opportunity of the modern era. 2023 is CUSEF's 15th anniversary, and the return of the Hong Kong Forum in person. We build credence, facilitate exchange, and advance understanding through dialogue, through the issues that matter most: trade and economy, science and technology, people-to-people contacts, international finance, and global challenges from climate to health and food security. Leaders in government, business, and civil society participate in this annual meeting, co-organized with the China Center for International Economic Exchanges. We welcome you to the Hong Kong Forum, and we thank each of you for participating together.
本人董建华敬此宣誓，本人就任中华人民共和国。
On July 1st, 1997, Mr. Tung Chee-hwa became a part of history when he was sworn in as Hong Kong's first chief executive. He was born in 1937, on the same day that the Second Sino-Japanese War broke out. His first home was Shanghai, before moving with his family to Hong Kong as a child. Thus, his formative years were shaped as much by China as they were by wartime conflict, giving him an early empathy for human suffering, but also the dream of human progress. Later, as an adult in New York, he raised a family, began a career in American industry, and created friendships that would last a lifetime. Mr. Tung believes that the United States and China have the capacity to shape the future and help ensure the well-being of humanity. More than ever, they must lean into compassion and leverage the people and communities trusted by all sides to pave the way to a more peaceful world. Today, we pay tribute to his leadership and that of two visionaries whose legacies we work with at the China-United States Exchange Foundation: President Jimmy Carter and the Carter Center, and President George H.W. Bush and the foundation named for him that champions the two countries. Jimmy Carter was the U.S. president who normalized relations with Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping. In doing so, they laid the groundwork for decades of engagement, which among its many achievements brought forward the end of the Cold War. Today, President Carter is 99 years old. He calls it destiny that he was born on October 1st, 1924, exactly 25 years before the founding of the People's Republic of China, the country and the people with which he would later make history.
For so long, the world has asked so much of you. What do you ask of us?
What I want from the Chinese people is to stay as friends with mutual respect with the United States. We're the two most powerful countries on earth, and China is becoming even more powerful as the years go by.
We also remember President George H.W. Bush, who lived in Beijing in the 1970s as director of the U.S. Liaison Office, an appointment that made him the de facto ambassador. It was this period of his life that convinced him that American engagement abroad was needed to ensure global stability. He formed a special connection with China, and one that is unique even among American presidents. During his 15 months in Beijing, he engaged with the Chinese people in a deep and human way, connecting with top leaders and ordinary citizens alike. The bicycling ambassador, as he came to be known, used his time in China to shape his view of the world. Today, we honor the joint legacy of Mr. Tang, President Carter, and President Bush that underpins the enduring ties between two countries and one humanity. We thank them for their service.
From a very early stage, I set this dream to make China good, to continue to be very interested in the United States of America, and try to bring the two countries together. And I told my family that if I have to crawl, I would do it every day of my life to make US-China better.
You've worked in this relationship for the largest part of your life. What would you tell about the young people today about doing the same as you do?
The future is better than today, and that is what they have to understand. But a better future doesn't come automatically. We all have to work for it, and we can work for it.
As a reminder, today's program is on the record and open to the media. Tomorrow's program will be closed to the media. Now, to welcome us to the Hong Kong Forum on U.S.-China Relations 2023, Mr. John Zhao, Chairman of the China-United States Exchange Foundation.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is truly a great privilege for me to stand before you today. On behalf of our founder, Mr. Tong Qianhua, and the entire board of CUSEF, I want to extend our sincere gratitude to all of you for being here in person for this 2023 Hong Kong Forum on U.S.-China relations. The ability to gather safely is not lost on us, particularly after 3 years of the pandemic. I wanted to welcome all of you to Hong Kong. As you will see in the next few days, this incredible city is open for business. I am particularly honored to have with us today special participants who are continuing the important work of the three men featured in our short film you just saw. Mr. Neil Bush, founder and chair of the George H.W. Bush Foundation. Thank you. Megan Martz of the Carter Center. Megan, thank you. Our governor, CUSEF's governor, C.C. Tang, and our new vice chairman, Andy Tang. As CUSEF's new chairman, I recognize that I'm stepping into large shoes that are frankly impossible for anyone to fill. I'm humbled by the trust that is being placed in me by Mr. Tong and the board. I know that with my fellow governors, including our founding Vice Chair, Victor Fong, and our new Vice Chair, Mr. Andy Tong, I will be well supported to carry on. Mission is possible. This year marks CUSEF's 15th anniversary. We're excited to build and expand the important work started by our founder and the chairman emeritus, Tong Qianhua. The U.S.-China relationship remains the most important bilateral relationship in the world. It is also becoming the most consequential global issue for the world. A peaceful, sustainable coexistence of U.S. and China matters to us all. This is why our mission at CUSEF is not to serve one side or the other, but to serve the China-US relationship. In doing so, we are advancing the well-being of humanity and the sustainability of the planet. Today, amidst global uncertainty and an increasing complex China-US relationship, our work is more important now than ever before. Only through continued communications can our two countries coexist peacefully and work together to overcome the many challenges facing our world. At CUSEF, we are doing our part by going bigger, wider, and deeper than we have ever before. We're doubling down on our work to build trust, facilitate exchanges, and advance dialogue and understanding. We aim to be a convener of dialogue and a platform for the exchange of important ideas and views, particularly different and diverse views. As a bilateral relationship is a truly global issue, we must engage not just representatives from both countries, but people from around the world. And there is no better place for a diverse global perspective than Hong Kong, a uniquely international city. Hong Kong is now not only the founding home for CUSEF, and where we launched the forum in 2019, it is also a long-standing convener of international cultures, businesses, and ideas. We're excited to take advantage of our position here and leverage Hong Kong's commitment to international exchange and collaboration. As we embark on our renewed commitment at CUSEF, I'm particularly proud of the very talented professional team under the leadership of our new president, James Chow. In fact, I met and spoke with the whole team last night right here as I was walking through the venue. Their passion and energy give me tremendous inspiration and motivation. I see in them the spirit and the dedication of C.H. Tong. While there's no single person that can achieve what C.H. did for CUSEF, together, we will take our work to the next level. As C.H. often said, and he mentioned it in the video we just saw, every day of his life, he has worked to make the world a better place, even if he has to crawl. When we leave this gathering in a few days from now, let us all follow his footsteps and commit to doing everything we can to make his vision a reality and make our world a better place. With that, I'm very proud to reintroduce our president, James Chow. James?
Well, thank you very much to Mr. John Zhao, to our Vice Chairman, Mr. Andy Tung, and of course, our founding Vice Chairman, Dr. Victor Fung, for the trust and opportunity that you invest in this executive team. We thank you, and I promise you we will deliver. Good afternoon. I'm James Chow. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Mr.毕井泉, the Executive Vice Chairman of CCIEE, the China Center for International Economic Exchanges. Mr. Bi is a member of the Standing Committee and Vice Chairman of Economic Affairs of the 14th Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference. Mr. Bi has also held senior positions in government, including Deputy Secretary General of the State Council, Secretary General of the leading party members group, Commissioner of the China Food and Drug Administration, and Commissioner of the State Administration for Market Regulation, as well as Secretary General and Vice Chairman of the National Development and Reform Commission. With the China-United States Exchange Foundation, CCIEE jointly organizes the Hong Kong Forum on U.S.-China Relations. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr.毕井泉.
(尊敬的赵令煥主席，尊敬的各位嘉宾、女士们、先生们、朋友们，大家下午好！很高兴来到香港，与中美交流基金会共同主办香港中美论坛。我代表中国国际经济交流中心，对各位嘉宾的到来表示热烈的欢迎，并对中美交流基金为办好论坛所做的筹备工作表示衷心的感谢。我们今天在这里讨论中美关系，首先要向历史上推动中美关系发展和做出重要贡献的两国前领导人、政治家们、商界的领袖们致敬。特别是要对创办中美论坛的董建华先生致敬。今天看到很多在中美关系发展历史上做出重要贡献的来自美国和香港的朋友们，感到非常的亲切，对大家多年来关心推动中美关系发展、积极参与中美论坛活动表示衷心的感谢。APEC 会议即将召开，中美两国元首有望举行会晤，这使关心中美关系的国家和人们都受到了极大的鼓舞。大家都期盼着中美关系能够止跌企稳，尽快回到健康稳定发展的轨道。中美关系是世界上最重要的双边关系，中美两国能否正确相处，事关人类的前途命运。52年前，中美两国领导人以卓越的战略目光， 做出了中美建交的正确选择，开启了中美关系正常化的进程，既造福了两国的人民，也改变了世界。中美两国经贸合作日益广泛和深入，形成了结构高度互补、利益深度交融的互利共赢关系。中国是美国的第3大贸易伙伴，最大的农产品出口市场，38个州的前3大出口市场。美国有100多万个工作岗位与对华出口有关，7万多家美国的企业在华投资兴业，每年的利润达500多亿美元。中国是美国第5大入境游来源国，还是美国第1大留学生的来源国。为推动中美关系，特别是中美经贸关系的发展，两国政府做出过不懈的努力。从2015年到2016年，中美两国先后举行了6次战略对话、8次战略与经济对话，讨论中美关系和中美经贸关系中重大的问题，保证中美经贸关系保持在健康发展的轨道。中国和美国每年都要召开经贸联委会，及时讨论解决经贸关系发展中的重大问题。两国曾经建立过100多个各类的部级之间的对话交流机制，及时解决双边关系中的矛盾和问题，为中美经贸关系正常发展提供了重要的制度性的保障。2018年以后，在美国对中国输美产品加征高额关税的背景下，中美贸易仍持续增长。尽管历经3年的疫情，2022年中美两国的贸易额仍然达到了7600亿美元，比疫情前的2019年增长了40%。事实表明，中美关系具有强大的韧性和活力。中美经贸关系你中有我，我中有你，谁也离不开谁。中美经贸关系的本质是互利共赢，很多商品美国即使不从中国进口，也会从其他国家进口，并不会降低美国的整体逆差水平。把经贸问题泛政治化、泛安全化，不仅严重影响两国关系与互信，也损害两国企业和人民的利益，会给全球经济带来灾难性的影响。中美两国应当认真落实去年元首会晤达成的相互尊重、和平共处、互利共赢的共识，充分利用近期成立的经济工作组、金融工作组和商业工作组，加强经济、金融、贸易领域的沟通协调，稳定和扩大双边的经贸往来，充分发挥经贸关系的压舱石作用，为全球的经济发展注入强劲的动力。中美两国要共同维护世界和平稳定的大局，携手推动国际社会以外交手段解决冲突和分歧，共同维护中美经贸关系成为世界经济的稳定之锚，保护好中美已经形成的经贸格局，共同维护全球产业链、供应链的稳定畅通，不断增强全球产业链、供应链的韧性，共同维护全球金融市场的稳定，加强金融领域的合作，共同维护全球能源安全、粮食安全和生态安全，为人类社会发展创造良好的可持续的环境，共同推动完善公平公正的全球治理体系，增强应对发展、安全、气候等全球性挑战的能力。中美两国的关系希望在人民，基础在民间，双方要持续扩大地方政府和教育、智库、人文、艺术等领域的交流，通过民间交往推动双边关系的回稳向好。今年以来，中国经济持续恢复向好，前3个季度 GDP 同比增长了5.2%， 预计全年可以实现5%的增长目标。今年以来，中国陆续出台了恢复和扩大消费、促进民营经济发展壮大、加大吸引外商投资等政策举措。中国仍是外商投资的热土，全球开放的高地。一个良性的、稳定的中美关系不仅有利于中美两国，也有利于世界。期待两国领导人在旧金山 APEC 会议期间举行会晤并取得成功，推动中美关系，特别是经贸关系，尽快回到健康稳定的发展轨道。最后，预祝本次论坛取得圆满成功，谢谢大家。
Well, may I add a few words of my own, mostly to thank you all for being here, and in doing so, for helping to champion a relationship that really matters. The condition of that relationship has declined now to a state that is fragile, uncertain, and concerning. And all of us in this room obviously believe in the power to shape the trajectory of the United States and China and the outcomes of the global future. The challenges we face are manifold, but remember, so too are the opportunities for a partnership that is characterized by trust and openness. This year's Hong Kong Forum gathers in the name of change and progress. Those words capture the spirit of our shared journey, and it calls on us to navigate the evolving landscape with wisdom and foresight. Change is a constant in our contemporary world, while progress is not a destination, but an enduring journey. The China-United States Exchange Foundation commits our service, responsibility, and optimism to the greatest relationship of the 21st century. This is the moment. Now let's get to work. The Hong Kong Forum is unique in its ability to bring together individuals with the capacity to accelerate progress. To open this year's meeting, we are honored to have China's ambassador to the United States of America and the US ambassador to the People's Republic of China. By agreeing to be here and to address this conference at this time of global division, we thank Ambassador谢锋and Ambassador Nicholas Burns for their public expression of unity and for entrusting us, the Hong Kong Forum, as a bridge for dialogue and a partner for peace. This is the third posting to the United States for Ambassador谢锋. He first went to Washington as counselor and spokesman, then as deputy chief of mission, and since May this year as China's top diplomatic envoy to DC. Before that, he was China's vice foreign minister, commissioner of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China here in the Hong Kong SAR, and ambassador to Indonesia. He has more than 2 decades of experience working in the US-China relationship specifically. We are delighted to welcome His Excellency, Ambassador谢锋.
Chairman Jiang Zhao, Executive Vice Chairman毕井泉, Ambassador Barshefsky, Ambassador Burns, Ambassador Baucus, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to revisit Hong Kong virtually and join friends old and new online at the Hong Kong Forum on US-China relations to discuss the bilateral relationship and explore the path forward. Since its inception in 2008, the China-US Exchange Foundation has stayed committed to encouraging constructive dialogue and diverse exchanges between our two peoples, and made positive contribution to promoting China-US communication and cooperation. As a Chinese saying goes, when drinking water from the well, one should never forget those who dug it. Let me first take this opportunity to salute and express my heartfelt gratitude to Chairman Emeritus Dong Chi-hua and all friends who have been long caring for and supporting China-US relations. When I was the DCM of the Chinese Embassy in the United States in 2008, I witnessed how Mr. Dong traveled back and forth and worked relentlessly to boost China-US exchanges and cooperation. The memory is as vivid as ever. The theme of the forum this year, Change and progress is highly relevant in the context of the current international situation and China-US relations. It reflects the vision and courage to foster new opportunities amid crisis and open up new horizons on a shifting landscape. Right now, changes in the world, in our times, and in history are unfolding in ways like never before. The world economy is coming under greater downward pressure. The crisis in Ukraine is lingering on. Conflicts have again flared up in the Middle East. Instabilities and uncertainties are apparently on the rise. At the same time, around the world, people's appeal for peace, development, and cooperation is getting louder and louder, and their aspiration for a better life is unstoppable. As China-US relations suffered from serious difficulties in the past few years and hit the lowest point since the establishment of diplomatic ties, there has also been a growing call for stopping the downward spiral. To our encouragement, under the guidance of President Xi Jinping and President Biden, and with joint efforts of both sides, we have seen some positive signs of a more stable China-US relationship recently. The two sides have conducted a series of high-level interactions. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Secretary of the Treasury Janet Yellen, Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo, and Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Kerry paid visits to China. Vice President Han Zheng visited the United States to attend UNGA and had bilateral meetings with the US side. Member of the Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee and Foreign Minister Wang Yi recently concluded his successful visit to the United States, during which he had candid, in-depth, substantive, and constructive communication with the US side. All these have together sent out a positive signal of stabilizing China-US relations. Both sides believe that this is beneficial and necessary for our two countries to maintain dialogue. Both share the hope to stabilize and improve bilateral relations as soon as possible, and both agreed to work together toward a meeting between the two presidents in San Francisco. The two sides have launched a series of dialogue mechanisms: China-US consultations on Asia-Pacific affairs, maritime affairs, arms control and non-proliferation, and foreign policies have been rolled out. The two sides have set up economic and financial working groups, and the two commerce authorities have established communication channels involving the business communities, as well as an export control information exchange mechanisms. China's Special Envoy for Climate Change, Xie Zhenhua, just had climate consultations with his counterpart, Mr. Kerry, in Sunnylands, California. While our two countries do have differences, our common interests are not to be dismissed. We should and must expand the list of cooperation through dialogue and manage differences and disagreements. The two sides have reignited exchanges and cooperation at various levels. President Xi Jinping personally met with the bipartisan delegation of the US Senate, led by Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Governor of California, Gavin Newsom. The China-US Sister Cities Conference was held in Suzhou last week. All these are examples of more lively exchanges between the legislatures and more robust cooperation at the subnational level. Also, good news keep coming in: people-to-people exchanges. Passenger flights will increase to 70 every week. China has resumed group tours to the United States and streamlined the visa application process, and will continue to facilitate people's travels. Not long ago, I visited the state of Iowa, which President Xi first visited in 1985 and revisited in 2012. There I felt it more acutely that the foundation and hope of the China-US relationship lie in the people. Its future lies in the youth, and its vitality comes from the subnational level. It is heartwarming to see more friends who cherish China-US friendship and support our relations coming out, speaking up and pitching in. Dear friends, of course, we are still facing grave challenges, and there remains a long way to go to stabilize and improve the bilateral relationship. Most importantly, we need to find the right way for our two countries to get along in the new era. The three principles outlined by President Xi Jinping, namely mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and win-win cooperation, have pointed us in the right direction. The top priority is for both sides to make joint efforts toward a meeting between the two presidents in San Francisco by removing disruptions and creating an enabling environment. To move towards San Francisco, it is important to return to the Bali Consensus. This means earnestly acting on the important common understanding reached between our presidents in Bali and translating President Biden's statements into concrete actions, including that the United States does not seek to change China's system, does not seek a new Cold War, does not support Taiwan independence, does not support two Chinas or one China, one Taiwan, and has no intention to seek decoupling from China or to halt China's economic development. To move toward San Francisco, it is important to enhance whole process management. The path to San Francisco cannot rely on autopilot. It is necessary to foster a sound atmosphere before dialogue, build up positive outcomes during the process, and take solid follow-up actions afterwards. A good host needs to avoid creating any new trouble or obstacle, still less say one thing but do another. To move towards San Francisco, it is also important to work in the same direction. This includes clearing obstacles and managing differences with concrete actions. Avoid playing with fire or crossing the line, and properly handling sensitive issues such as the Taiwan question in accordance with the One China principle and the three Sino-US joint communiques. It is also about enhancing dialogue and cooperation in good faith and starting with small concrete steps that truly deliver for the two peoples so as to help stabilize and improve the bilateral relationship. As the world is emerging from the pandemic, China-US relations also need to come out of the woods. We encourage people from various sectors in both countries to travel more and have more dialogue and exchanges so as to gradually thaw the ice of misunderstanding and misperception and build bridges for mutual understanding. I count on the China-US Exchange Foundation and all the friends here to continue to make your voices of reason heard, pour wisdom, foster public support for China-US friendship, and make new contribution to bringing China-US relations back to the track of healthy, stable, and sustainable development. I wish the Hong Kong Forum on US-China Relations 2023 a great success. May Hong Kong, the pole of the Orient, shine brighter than ever, and let us together usher in a brighter future for China-US relations. Thank you.
We thank Ambassador谢锋for speaking to us there from Washington, D.C. Ambassador Nicholas Burns first visited China in 1988 when he accompanied Secretary of State George Shultz, and then in 1989 with President George H.W. Bush. He also made visits to China with Secretaries Warren Christopher and Madeleine Albright, including during the Hong Kong handover in 1997. He's had a long and storied career in American diplomacy, serving 6 presidents and 9 secretaries of state. And he was a member, quite recently, of the Foreign Policy Advisory Board of Secretary of State John Kerry. It is a great honor to welcome to this Hong Kong Forum His Excellency Ambassador Nicholas Burns.
Ladies and gentlemen, greetings from Beijing. My name is Nick Burns. I'm the American Ambassador to the People's Republic of China. My thanks to the China-United States Exchange Foundation, Chairman John Zhao, and the China Center for International Economic Exchanges, its Vice Chairman Bi Jingguan. Many thanks for the invitation to speak this afternoon. Warm greetings from Beijing to my U.S. counterparts who are joining you there in person, including my predecessor, former Ambassador Max Baucus, as well as former U.S. Trade Representative Charlene Barshefsky, along with the many distinguished participants attending your forum. I'd also like to acknowledge my counterpart, the Chinese Ambassador to the United States, Ambassador谢锋, who spoke to you just now. Unfortunately, I couldn't be with you in person in Hong Kong due to my obligations here in Beijing this week, but I welcome the opportunity to speak to you today about the U.S.-China relationship, which is and always has been both exceptionally consequential and extremely complex. As we approach the 45th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between the United States and the People's Republic of China, there's no doubt that a stable bilateral relationship is critical to both of our countries and to the broader global community. I can report to you this afternoon that the U.S.-China relationship is more stable, and there is certainly better communication between our governments than was even the case just 6 months ago. That does not mean that the relationship is not competitive, because it still is. It does not mean we don't have major differences, because we still do across the board. But it does mean that we're better connected and better able to manage these differences between Washington and Beijing responsibly. In my world of diplomacy, that's progress. Consider what we've accomplished since early this summer. We've seen visits by Secretaries Tony Blinken, Janet Yellen, and Gina Raimondo. Our Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, John Kerry, has visited, as did Henry Kissinger. Our National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, and Foreign Minister Wang Yi met in Malta, where I joined those discussions that lasted more than 13 hours in a weekend in September. Our Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, led a bipartisan congressional delegation to China in October, the first such delegation in more than 4 years. And California Governor Gavin Newsom recently spent 8 days in China and Hong Kong. The recent visit by Director and Foreign Minister Wang Yi to the United States, where he met President Biden, Secretary of State Blinken, and National Security Advisor Sullivan, was also consequential. And there are other visits to come, including by Vice Premier He Feng, who will be traveling to the United States later this week for meetings with our Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen. We've also seen some progress in our work on trade and investment. China is the 3rd largest U.S. export market. China is the 3rd largest trade partner globally for the United States, after Mexico and Canada. In fact, U.S.-China bilateral trade in goods reached an all-time high in 2022 at $690 billion. Overall, the U.S. Commerce Department estimates that U.S. exports to China directly support 750,000 American jobs. Our leaders, President Biden, Secretaries Blinken, Yellen, and Raimondo, and I have all made clear we want that full trade relationship with China to continue. We do not seek to decouple our two economies. In the words of Secretary Yellen, that would be disastrous, and it would run counter to our national interests. We want to see the U.S. business community here in China succeed. At the same time, we are for de-risking in our China strategy on trade. We've learned much from the pandemic, the need to secure supply chains in critical minerals and critical materials. And we've also committed to insulating our partners from economic coercion. In addition, we've taken trade measures to protect our national security, export controls on dual-use technologies to protect our country. These are non-negotiable, as Secretary Raimondo made clear publicly during her recent visit. China, by the way, has adopted nearly identical policies. We've also created 8 new bilateral working groups to communicate on economic issues and work out our differences, including Treasury's Economic and Financial Working Groups, the Department of Commerce's Commercial Issues Working Group and Information Exchange on Export Controls, and the agricultural working groups between our 2 governments. The purpose of these groups is to provide ongoing channels for our teams to drill into the substance of economic, trade, and financial policy issues. We're focusing on specific, high-priority economic topics on which we can make tangible progress. These are important developments to position our 2 governments to support a continuation of robust trade. We are engaging China, we hope productively, on other issues as well. Climate, global health, food security, and counter-narcotics are issues of global concern that our 2 presidents identified a year ago in Bali as areas where our 2 countries can and should work together. Despite these areas of progress, however, the U.S.-China relationship is complicated and complex. We cannot ignore the differences and frictions between our 2 countries. China, we believe, needs to open its markets further and provide a level playing field for U.S. businesses. We want to see progress on intellectual property rights, forced technology transfers, and subsidies to domestic firms in China that tilt the playing field against American companies. We will also not back down from advocating for our values, including freedom of navigation and rule of international law in the South China Sea, peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, and the need for all to be committed to a peaceful solution, our deep and cherished commitments to human rights and human freedom. These objectives do not need to be mutually exclusive. Our 2 countries can manage our differences responsibly and cooperate on issues of global concern. As our Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen wrote in an excellent op-ed earlier this week, we are pursuing a pragmatic strategy that protects our vital national security interests while seeking a stable and healthy economic relationship with China. Organizations like the China-United States Exchange Foundation, which is dedicated to building mutual understanding and promoting bilateral exchanges, play an important role in bolstering people-to-people ties between our 2 countries. We need to create greater people-to-people contacts. We need more students, more business people, more tourists going back and forth between the 2 countries, and more direct flights. These connections are critical to our relationship. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. I wish you all the best for your conference, and I look forward to hearing about the results and about your recommendations. Thanks again.
Oh, we thank very much Ambassador Nicholas Burns, who put out a call there for your thoughts, your ideas, your solutions, which we'll be collecting not only through this high-level plenary today, but also at the end of the conference as well. José Ramos-Horta is the current president of Timor-Leste, or East Timor. It's a country of 1.3 million people and the first new sovereign state of this century. He was a first-hand participant in its struggle for independence, spending more than 2 decades in exile as a leading spokesman for the resistance movement. In 1996, he was jointly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize with Bishop Carlos Bello in recognition of their long, non-violent efforts and for achieving a just and peaceful solution to a very long conflict. He is Timor-Leste's 3rd Prime Minister, 4th President, and last year he re-emerged from retirement to win a landslide victory, becoming its head of state again. And I think in this picture over here you can see that he has a black mark on his finger, which is what you get once you've cast a vote to avoid any duplication. His Excellency planned to be with us here in Hong Kong today, but this same week he has back-to-back state visits to Brunei and the Philippines. Still, the President asked to address his conference and to draw on his own personal experiences, not only as a head of state, but more simply in his long commitment to building trust and resolving what we think sometimes are impossible disagreements, but actually disagreements that really can be solved.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Excellencies. Thank you for inviting me to join you today with some reflections on China-U.S. relations. obviously coming from Timor-Leste, a small island of a bit over 1 million people in Southeast Asia, soon to be full member of ASEAN. We already participate in all ASEAN meetings of head of state and government. I thank ASEAN leaders for supporting us, for welcoming us as one of them. Talking about U.S. and China relationship forever was important through history. European Union, China, U.S., China, the rest of Asia, China, for different reasons, going back to the upheavals of the 50s and 60s and 70s. China today is a global power, economic and financial power, needless to emphasize that we all know. The important thing is that how with the rise in China to be an economic financial superpower that helps maintain stability of the dollar and help maintain the stability of U.S. economy and the economy of many other countries. But where China also needs U.S., needs Europe, needs prosperity of all of us to continue to prosper and to live peacefully. This is the new world of today, the new China. I would advise my American friends, I have the greatest relationship with the U.S. I know the U.S. Congress inside out. I lobbied the U.S. Congress forever, since I was in my early 20s, till now. Have the great admiration for the U.S. Congress, the U.S. administration, politics, history, culture. But I cannot agree with this blind spot on China. Just because China is no longer poor, China is a competitor, we might say, if someone in the US say it is a rival, yes, be it a rival, but not a threat, or not an intentional threat. Maybe China is a threat to U.S. economic financial dominance. Yes, of course. China is financing U.S. debt, financing U.S. deficit. So I would advise my friends in the U.S. to be extra cautious in dealing with Taiwan. China must be one of the most tolerant countries in the world, whereby a territory that belongs to them, and only because of a history of colonialism, of civil wars, occupations, that they lost control of that island, Taiwan, that having normalized relations with the United States and the rest of the world, U.S. continued to fuel massive amounts of weapons to Taiwan. It's almost like an external power would intervene in some of the crises in the world with massive injection of weapons to one side. Of course, the Chinese profoundly resent that, and it causes enormous friction. And when the President of the United States, Donald Trump, imposed a tariff war, totally irrational, on China, and then blamed China for everything related to the COVID pandemic, showing little sympathy for China. And in spite of all of that, the Chinese face of humiliation, of criticism, they continue their engagement with the rest of the world. China is present throughout Africa, is present in my country, present in all of Latin America, in Europe, contributing to the well-being of millions of our people. We don't see China as a threat, and we don't see the United States as a threat. China never invaded any country. U.S. did, for many different reasons. I will not enter into that. I just would hope that please, for the sake of our region, Asia, for the sake of the world, the U.S. and China normalize relations, engage in patient dialogue, set up mechanisms of regular consultation to dissipate rumors, misinformation, and the two countries cooperate to fight diseases in the world, to end poverty in the world, to address challenges in education, in youth unemployment, in partnership, obviously, with regional organizations, with the UN system. This is what we want to see US and China. This is what world leaders are supposed to do. This is what global powers are supposed to do. Show responsibility, lessen the tension that negatively impact on all of us. We do not wish to choose sides in something that we consider as irrational. Choose between the US and China. We, Timor-Leste, we are a democracy. One of the best in the world, according to the Economist and the Freedom House. We are rated number 10 in the world in press freedom. But we don't judge China or any other country that does not follow, we adhere to what we believe in, multi-party democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for giving me this time to share some concern on politics in our region, on security, peace challenges in our region, on the relationship between the two superpowers, China and the US. God bless you all.
Well, what President Ramos-Horta said just there when he was talking about fighting poverty and future-proofing the years ahead in fighting climate change, for example, the US-China relationship in itself is a global issue. And he reminds us also very much of the power of communication. We're broadcasting live today, I think, on 4 television networks and also across digital platforms as well. So this is all very critical, that it's not one part or another part, but it's all the parts together that really make this happen. We now move to our high-level plenary, where we're going to hear from a community of global figures that support the Hong Kong Forum with the insights that they will share on this stage. Our first speaker is Charlene Barshefsky, the 12th United States Trade Representative. She was appointed by President Bill Clinton, and she worked with Premier Zhu Rongji on establishing the terms for China's entry to the World Trade Organization. Unsurprisingly, her landmark negotiations then have been analyzed in case studies at Harvard Business School. Please welcome to the stage Ambassador Charlene Barshefsky.
Just a few general remarks, if I may. Thank you, John Chow. Thank you, James. Thank you also, Victor Fung, who I've known for, of course, many years. I don't want to think about how many years. Of course, the ambassadors that just spoke. Let me also acknowledge Ambassador Max Baucus, a dear friend, as well as his much better half, Mel. And let me just say, with respect to Teng Chi-Hua, I've known C.H. Tung for 35 years. And during that time, he has been a source of inspiration, a great source of advice. I didn't always want to hear the advice, but he was always right. A great kindness, and so generous with his time and attention to the bilateral relationship. and I simply wanted to salute him. Let me begin in a conference on change and progress that between 1970 and 2008, the volume of world trade grew at an average rate of 5.5% a year. GDP growth averaged about 3.5% a year. Trade drove growth, it drove cooperation and development, and it drove poverty alleviation. But following the global financial crisis, trade growth slowed considerably. GDP growth slowed even further. Many people now call this an era of slowballization, and with it, the early fragmentation of the global economy. There are lots of forces that account for slowballization and fragmentation, and I'll name just a few. The global financial crisis and its very long tail recovery, a jaded United States, which had been a principal driver of globalization, a changing China, a rapid increase in trade barriers globally, tripling since 2019 alone, the disruption of capital flows, restrictions on migration, sanctions, the weakness of global institutions, particularly but not only the WTO, wealth inequality among nations, income inequality within nations, which have driven a backlash against globalization, COVID-19, war in Ukraine, including its geopolitical ramifications, now conflict in the Middle East. I could go on with this list. And as we consider slowballization and fragmentation of the global economy, we have to also add unsettled but certainly changing geopolitical alignments, which influence and over time may permanently shift direct investment and portfolio flows, supply chains, and the flow of goods and services. This is a dizzying array of factors putting pressure on globalization and impelling fragmentation. And the costs of this are very, very high. In geopolitical terms, fragmentation increases hostility, it reduces trust, it creates mistaken impressions, which then become concretized. In economic terms, while estimates vary, trade restrictions could reduce global economic output by as much as 7% over the long term, or about $7.4 trillion. That's the German and French economies combined. That is 3 times sub-Saharan Africa's annual output. And in part due to fragmentation, the IMF's 5-year forward projection on GDP growth is the lowest it's been in 30 years. And when the pie shrinks, economic aggression tends to accelerate. These forces of fragmentation is also in part because of the outsized role the US and China play in the global economy. We're 40% of the global economy, even though our economies are very intertwined. If you look on an inflation-adjusted basis, trade has gone down a bit, but the relationship remains huge, huge. The problem now, though, that we have is that the view of each is that the other poses a profound, almost existential economic and security threat. One on the economic side that can only be addressed through decoupling or de-risking, and on the security side through military buildup and global realignment. The balance between national security on the one hand and economic interdependence on the other will be increasingly pressured by the perceptions of risk and the continued likely expansion of the definition of national security. This word keeps growing and growing and growing. We're entering an increasingly chaotic period, fragmentation, geopolitical realignment, and maybe blocks at the end of the day. This is very different from the concept of globalization as we came to believe it would always be. It isn't. If we step back a minute, the truth is, China has been decoupling and somewhat insulating its domestic economy from the forces of globalization for a long time. The Great Firewall of China, the initial fragmentation of the internet, happened more than 25 years ago. WTO entry, which initially led to convergence with market-based norms by China, has now resulted in a divergence from those norms. Decoupling in the technology sphere by China is quite intentional. China is very open and public about it. It wants self-reliance. It wants self-sufficiency. These are national priorities, at least since 2006, when it announced its science and technology programs. And from there, indigenous innovation, the identification of strategic emerging industries, the mega projects program, the integrated circuits program, Made in China 2025, these are all import substitution projects, meaning get the imports out, become self-sufficient, create homegrown substitutes, but at the same time, try and increase the dependency of third countries on the China market to increase China's leverage. The 14th five-year plan could not be more explicit on this very point. The US came a little late to decoupling, de-risking, whatever we want to call it. And but for former President Trump's tariffs, which I fully agree were ill-advised, and COVID-19, I'm not quite sure the US would have gotten to the policies it now has. Supply chain decoupling of goods initially rose because of COVID-19, and the US realized it was incapable of making essential products. Excuse me. The problem is that, of course, the notion of self-sufficiency in critical products has expanded beyond critical products for even goods that are non-essential. On the technology side for the US competitiveness on tech was always driven by the private sector, and the US government left it just that way. But now we see significant government intervention in the US, legislation, funding, so on and so forth, as well as restricting US firms from investing in a variety of sectors in China. And then, of course, both countries have implemented sanctions, the US, frankly, far more than China, and this is also a decoupling, de-risking strategy, and neither side is through with any of this. no question, the relationship's becoming a little more stable now. Also, no question, underlying it, the fundamentals aren't going to change. I hate to be the skunk at the picnic, but I do think that's accurate. National security may be the impetus on both sides, but the unnecessary fragmentation of the global economy results when this definition of national security grows unabated. China now has 17 categories of national security. It's only a matter of time before the US won't have 17, but will expand its definition slowly. We face a situation where great powers' geopolitical strategy and markets are entangled but have collided. Where the US and China have opposing economics, ideologies, systems, ambitions, and these can no longer be contained or, unfortunately, divorced from the global economy. We face the fact that each side has weaponized interdependence toward foreign policy objectives, including, but not only, national security. And we face an intensely competitive dynamic between the two sides. And that competitive dynamic goes far beyond technology. It infuses and suffuses every aspect of the relationship. Trade, finance, technology, global institutions, even geographically. China goes here, we follow. We go there, China follows. All over the world. It makes almost no difference. And this reinforces fragmentation of the global commons. The danger to both sides is that competition is inherently oppositional. Aggressive competition is inherently oppositional, magnifying the differences, obscuring commonalities, and usually zero-sum. Competition sets up a reactive cycle among the parties, redirecting resources, heightening the rhetoric, making changes in policy very difficult for both sides. Reactive policies like this give rise to a negative feedback loop. Action, reaction, escalation, repeat. This is very dangerous territory. And when competition is viewed as existential, as both the US and China have posited, then fear and demagoguery take center stage. In business, competition authorities say to companies, cut it out, stop. There's no regulator here. Can we think of a country? Can we think of an international institution that can actually force the US and China to stop? No, there is none. The US and China have to stop. The two of them have to stop. And I have a suggestion to make on that score. I think the current round of activities between the two are very positive and to be welcomed. Engagement is critically important, and trying to manage differences is critically important. But there is an area missing from formal agreement, and that is cooperation. If you've noticed, cooperation is ad hoc, one-off. It's held hostage to the broader relationship. It's narrow, and it doesn't have to occur. It's a kind of nice to have, maybe, but not viewed by either side, actually, as essential. So my proposition is that if both countries entered a formal compact on cooperation, a kind of protocol on cooperation, you'd accomplish several things. Number one, cooperation would be not just a pillar to the relationship. It would be integral to the entire relationship. It would set up a habit of cooperation which no longer exists, frankly. It would force both sides into de-escalatory meetings on a routine schedule. All of this would be made public, so both sides are held to account. This would not be an optional exercise. It would be what is a part of the exercise and a part of the relationship. And more than anything else, the two sides might actually accomplish something more lasting. So I would just leave you with the following thought, that it should be important to both China and the US that sober reflection, rather than a reactive cycle or escalatory momentum, governs the relationship between the two sides. And it should be important to both sides to avoid further trade and economic fragmentation of a global economy from which the two countries derive disproportionately. The US and China need to start focusing on a comprehensive agreement and agenda on cooperation to try and add some balance to the relationship. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Barshefsky. I think what you've given us is a whole package of ideas and solutions that we can really begin to take forward from the completion of this Hong Kong Forum, so that actually we have something to work on straight away. And I think not just the ideas and solutions, but also how do you think about the relationship? What's your approach? What's your manner? We always talk about leaning in with compassion. And I think those are some of the ideas that you've reiterated here today. So thank you very, very much. And we'll be gathering these ideas so these speeches are not just speeches, but they become templates of how we go forward. Every September, the world gathers in New York for the most important global meeting at the UN General Assembly. And at the center of that is the President of the General Assembly, whose duty it is to bring the world together and to bring them up on stage. In 2015, the United Nations celebrated its 70th birthday, and the President of the GA that year was Mogens Lykketoft, who brought to the stage not only China's President Xi Jinping, US President Barack Obama, but also Pope Francis, three great champions, as it turned out, on climate change towards the end of that year. Mogens Lykketoft was so key to getting member states to commit and say yes to the Sustainable Development Goals, and in working with Secretary General Ban Ki-moon to making sure that the US and China and other parties actually said yes to a Paris Agreement, which we're still trying to realize and manifest fully today. Mogens Lykketoft is a long-time, or was a long-time, finance minister and foreign minister of Denmark and speaker of the Danish parliament. But away from the titles, uniquely, he first went to China in November and December of 1978. And he can still remember the news of that time and traveling on trains into the countryside that he heard on the radio, and beginning to hear about this thing called 改革开放, which was, of course, reform and opening up. He was there as it was coming out, and he was there a few days before the normalization of the US-China relationship. We're so thrilled that you said this year that you won't come back on another long-haul travel, and then you got our invitation, you said, gosh, I'm coming back. The moment you arrived back from South Korea a few weeks ago. But thank you very much for being with us, His Excellency Mogens Lykketoft.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and my dear old friend, President James Chow, thank you for the invitation to address this distinguished audience in the China-United States Exchange Foundation. When I received President Hu Jintao as Speaker in the Danish Parliament in 2012, he called me an old friend of China. It is true that I have for a lifetime argued for the best possible both bilateral and international relations with China and for China's strong participation in maintaining a peaceful global order. I visited China 18 times since that autumn of 1978, James just mentioned, when the new economic policy was announced by Deng Xiaoping. The policy that has increased China's GDP more than 30 times and lifted so many hundred million people out of poverty. Over time, I've had different official capacities being here and had in-depth conversations with Chinese leaders such as Zhu Rongji, Gang Qishan, Liu Keqiang, Yang Jieqi, and Wang Yi. Thus, I stand for you as a witness from Denmark, for Europe, of China's truly incredible transformation over the past 45 years. This doesn't mean that I am apologetic about China's policies, but I am convinced that in this century we will see only two global superpowers, the US and China, in a multipolar world, of course, alongside with Europe, Japan, India, Indonesia, Brazil, other big economies. But I observed already this development as President of the United Nations General Assembly in the optimistic year of 2015, when we approved the Sustainable Development Goals and adopted the ambitious climate agreement in Paris. The SDGs showed us the urgent action needed to meet with the challenges of today, because since 1945, the year before I was born, the world population has tripled, while production, pollution, as well as our impact on nature and the atmosphere and climate temperature has increased tenfold. We in the rich countries have the main responsibility. Naturally, billions of people in poorer countries, led by China, are aspiring for the same pattern of production and consumption that we in North America and Europe have already had. But in fact, what we know is that they can't get it and we can't maintain it. The future demands stop for fossil fuels, a true circular economy, and much stronger efforts to protect nature and biodiversity. We will not reach a sustainable global future without the US and China leading the way, working together. The success of the climate conference in Paris was, of course, brought about by skillful French COP presidency and the Secretariat of the UNFCCC, but the bottom line is that it was only possible because Paris was the unique moment in recent history where the presidents of China and United States, Xi Jinping and Barack Obama, worked closely together to convince and nudge all other countries to join. The US and China will always compete and disagree on many issues, of course, because of different political systems, different worldviews, but these disagreements have turned dangerous since 2016. And there has been an escalatory rise in nationalism, incitement, suspicion, and mistrust in the public discussion on both sides. I sincerely hope that the two big countries will realize once again that they have much more in common than opposing interests when it comes to humanity's most existential issues. When acting together, China and the US have the whole world in their hands. Their willingness and ability to act as guardians for global cooperation will determine whether peace can be restored and preserved, and whether we can maintain beneficial economic interdependence and stop climate change before it's too late. There will be some national insourcing for strategic and industrial policy reasons, and China's development will, I assume, also be driven more and more by expanding home markets, but a new international balance must be found without trade war between US and China and without further increase in protectionism globally. As also referred to by Charlene Barshefsky just a moment ago, the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, the formidable Kristalina Georgieva, wrote in an important article this September pointing out the huge costs of fragmentation of global markets. It will unavoidably lead to lower growth rates and more poverty. Potentially a global loss, as referred to by Charlene, will be over the coming years equal to the combined GDP of France and Germany. This is why we share a common interest in continuing cross-border trade and investment, hopefully better regulated by mutually agreed, renovated rules through the WTO and assisted by the OECD. Trust in predictability of national frameworks for investment should be restored. Sudden shifts in the treatment of foreign companies should be avoided. And we should hope for removing the understanding of the American policy towards China seen as an effort to hold back China's technological development and block China's ambition to further increase the welfare of its population. The meeting in San Francisco in a few days from now between the presidents of the US and China should be an important step towards a new era of stronger cooperation to secure peace, to improve the economy, and to work for a global consensus on promoting sustainable and responsible patterns of production and consumption. As allied with the United States, Europe has a role and, in my opinion, a duty to contribute to shaping that kind of consensus. We must do it with our own good example and our own core self-interest. But hope for a new consensus of global action on the economy and the climate depends on common efforts to overcome mistrust and near-military confrontations. There is an urgent need to reduce the arms race and reintroduce global agreements on open lines of communication, arms control, and real limitations in the stockpiles of nuclear and other weapons of mass destruction, as well as missile systems and conventional armaments. The new security threats from artificial intelligence must be regulated by international treaties and conventions, brought about not least by common efforts from US, China, and Europe. We have a common obligation to mankind to relocate resources from ever-increasing military spending to investment in the Sustainable Development Goals. First of all, We need the US and China to act in a much more coordinated fashion in order to end the terrible conflicts in Ukraine, in the Middle East, and to avoid the risk of military conflict in East Asia. I believe that the Chinese president is the best positioned statesman in the world to convince his friend, the Russian president, that it is in Russia's self-interest to stop the bloody, unwinnable war of aggression in Ukraine. China has wisely warned against any kind of nuclear weapons that can be brought, that can bring this to the brink of global conflict. We all have to repeat that there is no winner in a nuclear conflict, which is why it should never be fought. But for the increased humanity and prosperity, that is true about any war. This is why we created the United Nations in 1945, as stated in the UN Charter, to free future generations from the scourge of war. At the 20th Congress of the Chinese Communist Party, President Xi Jinping once again firmly committed China to the UN and its principles. That commitment should lead us also to reconstruct our international organizations in accordance with the changing picture of population and economic power. Such reorganization would serve global common interests to prevent further weakening of the United Nations by dividing us in competing international organizations, more or less. In order to give new strength to the United Nations, we should all recommit to refrain from any military intervention to change borders and political systems and act accordingly. The US and China will continue to compete for power in innovation and wealth, but hopefully they understand their fundamental common interest in letting the competition unfold within a shared global network with shared global rules. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Mogens Lykketoft for giving us this very strong picture, not only from Europe, but of course the international community. We're going to go now to Southeast Asia for our next couple of speakers. Dr. Bhokin Bhalakula has served in key senior roles in Thailand's politics, including as Minister of the Interior and Deputy Prime Minister. He was appointed as the President of the House of Representatives and President of the Senate. On the back of this success in leading both the lower and upper chambers of the National Assembly, he went on to advise the Prime Minister on a range of critical issues. Since departing from politics, he's been actively involved in sustaining and strengthening Thailand's relationship with China, among other countries, including for over a decade as the incumbent leader of the Thai-Chinese Culture and Economy Association. Thank you very much for coming to us from Bangkok, Your Excellency Bhokin Bhalakula.
Excellencies, honored guests, dear friends, thank you very much for inviting me to this prestigious high-level plenary of the Hong Kong Forum on U.S.-China relations. I would like to share insights from the perspective of Thailand and the ASEAN community on the crucial matter of improving relations between the United States and China. As a long-term politician active in Thailand, China and the Association of Southeast Asia, or ASEAN, I have witnessed firsthand the complex dynamics between these two great powers over the decades. The US and China have the world's largest economies, as you know, with the US GDP at 23 trillion US dollar and China's at 17 trillion. They also possess the world's largest military, spending 750 billion and 245 billion respectively on defense annually. Here in Thailand, we see both the opportunities and challenges of navigating relations with the US and China. The US is Thailand's third largest trading partner with around 46 billion in total trade in 2021. Major American companies like Chevron, ExxonMobil, and Amazon have invested tens of billions in Thailand over the decades. However, since 2014, relations with the US have been strained, with cuts in military assistance and some sanctions imposed, because Thailand tried to be more close to China. Meanwhile, in 2019, China became Thailand's largest trading partner, with two-way trade reaching 80 billion US dollar. Nearly 11 million Chinese tourists visited Thailand that year. China is also Thailand's largest source of foreign direct investment, pouring in billions into infrastructure and technology projects. However, many Thais are concerned about growing Chinese influence in our economy and Beijing's control over the Mekong River's water resources. Balancing relations with both powers remain a priority, but also a challenge for my country. The United States and China, as the world's two largest economies, as mentioned, play a monumental role in shaping the global economic and geopolitical landscape. Their relationship spans trade, as some speakers just mentioned, technology, security, history, and culture. It is crucial to recognize that tensions and misunderstanding between these two giants reverberate across the world, affecting economies, supply chains, alliance, and international stability. In 2019, US-China trade in goods and services amounted to a staggering $737.1 billion. These economic ties are not confined to just the two nations. They intricately link with ASEAN countries, making the region a vital node in the global supply chain. Thailand, as one of the economic powerhouses in ASEAN, greatly benefits from stable US-China relations. Our export to US and China last year totaled 46 billion US dollar and 80 billion respectively. Any prolonged disruption in US-China relations could adversely impact ASEAN economies, affecting millions of jobs and livelihoods. However, we also cannot ignore the risks posed by this rivalry. Across the wider region, tensions between the two powers create division even within ASEAN. Some nations align more closely with Washington, others with Beijing. There are already pressures testing ASEAN unity. A conflict between US and China could wreck Southeast Asia supply chains and decimate our economies. Unity and centrality must be maintained within ASEAN. In recent years, relations between the US and China have grown increasingly competitive and confrontational. According to a Pew Research poll, over 70% of Americans now view China unfavorably. Issues like trade deficits, technology transfer, Taiwan, Hong Kong, the South China Sea, and human rights have strained ties. Mutual trust is declining as disputes multiply. From imposing tariffs on billions in goods to dangerous military encounters. The two sides seem to be on a collision course. This growing rivalry poses grave risks in the regional peace and prosperity. However, I believe wisdom and pragmatism can still prevail. As the US and China navigate intense competition, cooperation remains possible and necessary in areas of mutual interest. ASEAN can play a constructive role in managing tensions and fostering stability. Therefore, I recommend several steps to improve US-China relations. First and foremost, the US and China must make meaningful efforts to rebuild trust. Right now, a fundamental lack of trust is poisoning nearly every aspect of this vital relationship in every aspect. To rebuild trust, both sides need to restore open lines of communication and find ways to work together on shared interests. There is a need to promote dialogue and understanding. Both the US and China must engage in sincere, transparent, and open communication. Track 2 dialogues and diplomatic initiatives must be intensified, fostering an environment where concerns can be addressed constructively. Secondly, trade imbalances and tariffs have been significant points of contention. With our deep economic and cultural ties to both the US and China, ASEAN nations, including my country, Thailand, can serve as a bridge, encouraging fair trade practices and fostering economic cooperation. Bilateral and multilateral trade agreements should be explored to ensure a level playing field for all nations involved. In particular, I believe ASEAN can be an invaluable conduit for trust building. For decades, our 10 member states have successfully managed relations with the major powers through dialogue, engagement, and pragmatic cooperation. The ASEAN way, grounded in consensus and non-interference, offers important lessons for navigating big power relations. At the regional level, existing ASEAN-led mechanisms like the East Asia Summit already provide useful platforms for the US and China and other Asia-Pacific countries to communicate and collaborate. ASEAN can explore how to best utilize and adapt these mechanisms to promote stable US-China ties. We can also serve as an honest broker when tensions arise. Our equidistant and neutral position allows ASEAN to engage all parties frankly and directly. During past periods of difficulty, ASEAN has used this role productively to defuse crisis and keep communication open. Next, regional security is paramount. Collaborative efforts are needed to address concerns related to the South China Sea and other regional flashpoints. ASEAN can play a pivotal role in facilitating dialogue and promoting peaceful solutions, ensuring stability in the region. We also need to invest in education and people-to-people exchanges. I insist this. Why? Because education and cultural understanding are bridges to lasting peace. Scholarships, exchange programs, and cultural initiatives can promote mutual respect and friendship between nations. These exchanges lay the foundation for a future generation that values cooperation and diplomacy, not conflicts and wars. Beyond this diplomatic arena, Southeast Asia offers tremendous economic opportunity and promises cooperation. Our dynamic economies and strategic location make us a natural hub for trade, investment, and infrastructure connectivity. By deepening economic integration, the US and China can foster healthy interdependence rather than unhealthy competition. In my opinion, US-China investment in ASEAN infrastructure projects can spur economic growth, create jobs, and enhance connectivity. This not only benefits the region, but also builds trust and relationships between the two big countries. The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, Free Trade Agreement, involving ASEAN, China, and other countries, covers around 30% of global GDP and population. This is immense potential for collaboration. Both the US and China are critical players in addressing climate change and sustainable development. Collaborative efforts in renewable energy, environmental conservation, and sustainable development can showcase the positive impact of cooperation, setting example for the world. Innovation knows no borders. Collaboration in technology, research, and development can lead to groundbreaking discoveries. ASEAN can serve as a hub for such collaborations, fostering an environment where innovation thrives and benefits humanity. Dear friends, with the closer approaches of the two countries recently, as mentioned in this forum by the two ambassadors from China and US, are good news for us. And according to my opinion, with the fear that the war in Gaza at present will expand and affect the world economy, I'm glad to hear that the US and China have mutually sought ways to bring peace to the region. I hope this kind of cooperation and understanding will lead to other areas mentioned above. In conclusion, the path to improving US-China relations require concerned efforts from all parties involved. As representatives of Thailand and ASEAN, we stand at the intersection of this global relationship. By promoting dialogue, fostering economic cooperation, and addressing security concerns, including investing in education and people-to-people exchanges, we can pave the way for a more stable and harmonious world. Let us remember that the choices we make today will shape the future for generations to come. With wisdom, diplomacy, and collaboration, we can navigate complexities of US-China relations, ensuring a future where cooperation prevails over conflict and understanding triumphs over division. There are no quick or easy solutions, dear friends. But if we persist step by step on this long journey, I hope that we all can reach a better destination. The time for leadership and engagement from all sides is now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Dr. Bhokin. As I promised, we're going to stay with Southeast Asia. Mahathir Mohamad is the longest-serving Prime Minister of Malaysia from 1981 to 2003, and again from 2018 to 2020, very memorably. His political career covers more than 75 years. That's almost the 2 times of the modern US-China relationship. Dr. Mahathir, as his country's in his first term as his country's leader, brought about widespread societal modernization and deep economic growth, symbolized in part by iconic infrastructure projects. And he substantially strengthened relationships across the Asia-Pacific, including with China, Japan, the Philippines, and Indonesia, among others. Now, his second term as Prime Minister began, as we all know, with a historic election victory. He was born in 1925, so just 1 year after Jimmy Carter, and he initially practiced as a medical medical doctor. I went to Malaysia, and his wife as well is pioneering public health specialist as well. I went to Malaysia a couple of weeks ago to talk to him about the US-China relationship from where he sits as a esteemed global leader, but also to ask him whether the tensions between them today necessarily surprises him or not.
Well, there has always been this kind of confrontation between United States and China. But lately we have seen US leaders visiting China and meeting with the Chinese leaders. That is a good sign. We hope that that will become something frequent, and where there are problems, that problems should be discussed and settled around the table, rather than having confrontations and wars and the like.
There is a trust deficit in the bilateral relationship. Looking back, do you think there was real trust to begin with in 1979 when President Jimmy Carter and Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping forged that relationship, or do you think they simply chose to look the other way and find a way forward for pragmatic purposes?
Yeah, there is always a distrust between two competing superpowers. Each one wants to be the number one superpower. But that, of course, led to competition. Now, competition is good, but when competition resolves into confrontation and wars, that is very bad. So people should come to their senses, because wars do not resolve any problem through debate and negotiation, or even going to a court of law. We will find resolution to conflicts without the damage and the death caused by war. So leaders should understand that. But unfortunately, there are even domestic pressures, so that the leaders have to take a stand to reflect the interests of certain elements in the country.
My American friends tell me that while the United States today is deeply divided, the one issue that unifies both sides of the political spectrum is their opposition to China and their fear of what could happen or what they think will happen in Taiwan. What's your take on that?
But China claims that Taiwan is a part of China, but it has never taken any action. No violent action against Taiwan or in any attempt made to invade and conquer Taiwan. I think the relationship is, Taiwan is useful to China. So I think China would want to leave Taiwan as it is, but we must accept that Taiwan is a part of China. So this idea that there should be a separate country, Taiwan as a separate country, and to do that we must have opposition, allies and all that. All these things are not contributing anything. You see, just the visit of Pelosi doesn't solve anything. It just made things worse.
Has that corner been turned since Speaker Pelosi's visit, given the recent high-level interactions with John Kerry, Antony Blinken, Janet Yellen, or do you still think that's a sting being felt?
I think they are coming to their senses, because confrontation and eventual wars is going to destroy the whole world. You know, we cannot afford that. We want to have peace and stability, and any attempt that will contribute towards a good relation should be supported by all parties, including the two main parties in America.
As a statesman yourself, a long-time statesman, and a global elder, what would your advice be to the leaders of both countries and the people who are able to influence and inform that relationship?
Setting up the trust is a very good move. But in negotiation, in trying to resolve conflicts, one has to accept that we cannot get everything that we want. We have to make sacrifice because the other side also will have to make sacrifice. Without foregoing certain demands that we have, we cannot reach agreement. So both the US and China must be prepared to lose some in order to gain more. That is, my belief is that you can never get 100% out of war, nor can you get out 100% out of negotiation. But on the other hand, in war you lose a lot of things. People die and countries are destroyed. But the end result is the same as negotiation. But with negotiation, there is no death, there is no destruction. So it is better to negotiate because the end result would be the same as fighting war. In a fight of war, you may win, you may lose. In negotiation also, you may win and you may lose, but without the destruction.
Thank you very much to Dr. Mahathir. There are, of course, many people here in the room to acknowledge, but a very special thank you to the young people here. We have delegations from Peking University, Tsinghua, Renmin, Fudan, Harvard, Columbia, Yale, Princeton, Georgetown, Chicago, Northwestern, Johns Hopkins, Nanjing, Cambridge, no Oxford, University College London, Chinese University of Hong Kong, the University of Hong Kong, Hong Kong Baptist University, AmCham, Sciences Po in Paris, Asia Global Institute, the Schwarzman Scholars, and even local high students from Victoria Shanghai Academy will be joining us tomorrow here. You are the next generation of champions from the US and China, and you are the founding members of CUSEF's new community that recognizes and empowers young people at the front lines of global challenges and the Sustainable Development Goals. One Young World is a UK charity that meets somewhere in the world every year. They've met in places as far apart as Johannesburg, Bogota, Pittsburgh, London, and a couple of weeks ago we went to Belfast to mark the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement that finally brought peace to Northern Ireland. Kate Robertson is the co-founder and CEO of One Young World. She was born in South Africa at a time of apartheid. One Young World was co-founded by Kate with the support of such luminaries as Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Secretary General Kofi Annan, Nobel Peace Prize winner Muhammad Yunus, who will be addressing us tomorrow, and the singer-songwriter and peace activist Bob Geldof.
Here's what I want you to remember. To make lasting progress against the problems we face, we must devote not only every ounce of our strength, but every ounce of our time.
Our mission now is to tell young people to become, all of them, planetary guardians.
rights are big words, but they're also strong and powerful and straightforward movements of people like us.
It is more important than ever that we seek out meaningful partners. It proves here that we're not alone.
And remember, when you're down and you want to give up, always keep marching forward.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the CEO and co-founder of One Young World, Ms. Kate Robertson. Kate, we have something special to share with everybody today. One Young World and CUSEF have finally got together after we've been together for more than a decade to create a CUSEF Young Leaders Scholarship. This is going to benefit 8 people in 2024, aged between 18 years old and 30 years old. They're going to get leadership training using Kate's global network of top leaders. And then, why are you standing so far away? I'm not going to bite. We are going to bring these 8 people to Montreal, to your next summit, where they're going to interact with the leaders that we saw on screen just then. But perhaps you can, and anyone can apply. I think the call out goes today from London. So tell us a bit about what's going to happen and how it's going to impact and what you see for us.
So firstly, I'm hugely honored to be here, James. Thank you so much, John, Victor, Andy, really, thank you so much. I always find these things quite difficult because I stand here not as myself, but as a representative and hopefully a valid spokesman of these brilliant young leaders from around the world. Now 17,000 of them in the network. This is not youth, this is young leaders. So it's all of you at the front here when you were a bit younger. I don't want to talk to the students at the back. But if you can imagine the young people that you meet, you people of my generation, if you meet them today and you say, this is me, this is a person who's going to achieve as I did and hopefully more. That's what we're looking for. So in this scholarship, which CUSEF have so generously done, what it means for each of these young leaders is that a scholarship to join One Young World community makes you an ambassador of the values of that community, which are truly all of the values on display here today. You become an ambassador and you attend your first summit, which next year will be in Montreal, and thereafter you are supported throughout your leadership journey, and we have them there in the leadership troops. One of them, Lauren Bush, Neil's daughter, she's a vintage ambassador going back to 2010, but we support them with their connections with world leaders. We support them with mainstream media, not just with social media, because that's easy these days, but support them to bring forward their influence. So this scholarship from CUSEF is really one of these remarkable ones that comes from civil society, but that bravely steps into the creation and development of the leaders that we want to see. More like you guys.
Kate, perhaps I could ask you to take center stage for a couple of minutes and talk about where you see we can connect intergenerations of leadership so we can deliver on impact specifically through the US and China. And maybe draw a little bit on your own story, having grown up in apartheid South Africa, and what we can learn from that historic lesson, both of truth, but particularly trust and reconciliation.
Thank you so much, James. I'm obviously, those of you who know English accents will know my accent is, you spotted it, Edward. I grew up in South Africa. Obviously, at my age, I'm a child of apartheid South Africa and all the privileges that white people had then. Did we ever believe when I was a young person that things were going to change? Not really. But they did change. As Martin Luther King said, the arc of history just does bend toward justice, and we have to hope that that is so. But it always seemed to me as a South African that we shouldn't be waiting for leaders to have to be imprisoned for 28 years, or in the case of Malala Yousafzai, to get shot in the head, for us to acknowledge them as leaders. That there was a job to be done for this coming generation. And why? You know, a lot of people who would say to me, Yeah, but, you know, they're young, they've got rose-tinted glasses, you know, who cares what they think? We all grow up, we all change, and that may be true. But this generation is, whether we like it or not, the most informed, most educated, and most connected generation in human history. There has been none other like this generation. And from them have emerged, in the last 13 years, the youngest billionaires in the world. So, hey, business people, don't tell me you can't be a billionaire at 20. Apparently you can. I missed my slot. We also see in the corridors of governments, we also see these very, very young leaders. Now, why? We know in the business community that we need them, and we need them. Why? Because these days, if you're not digital, you're not going to survive. Who are the masters of the digital world? Who are the cyber masters? They are that particular generation. So this is our work at One Young World. But for me, for my story, it's partly, as James said, it's the South African story. It's acknowledging that truth and reconciliation are incredibly hard work, but that they do work. What do they work at? Do they work at creating perfection? No. They work at creating that thing which we had believed we had in our grasp, that elusive thing called peace. That is why truth and reconciliation. My dear friend Desmond Tutu said to me when I proposed the idea of One Young World to him, he said, yes, we are going to do this. Remember that I had problems with truth and reconciliation, but it is still valid. I said, yes, Archbishop. And he said to me, as he said at the first One Young World Summit, he said, Kate, it's in your hands. And I think today, as we look at China-US Exchange Fund, this remarkable organization, which James has told me about so much about over the last couple of years. Well, to all of you, I guess, and so many of you actually carry real power. It's in your hands. We look today, I don't think that we believed, and one of the speakers previously mentioned it, 5 or 6 years ago, Mon, I think it was you talking 2015, I think we believed in some kind of peace somehow. That is not where we stand today. I didn't think in my lifetime to see armed conflict in the middle of Europe, almost, leave alone on the eastern edges. And we've turned away from what was the coming conflict in the Middle East. We have forgotten the efforts of truth and reconciliation that brought about the Oslo Accords. We have not paid attention. Working with these 17,000 young leaders as I do, and many of them are in touch with me on my personal channels, my private channels, as well as on social media, I know that One Young World as an organization has been called upon to comment on the situation in the Middle East. And you can imagine everybody's on a side. I was very reluctant that we should say anything. I'm not sure that bland statements contribute anything in this situation. Making a noise on social media doesn't really contribute anything, except it makes things an awful lot more divisive. So we have tried to walk some sort of middle path, which is almost impossible. It's awful to me that at Belfast, the keynote speech at the opening ceremony with 5,000 people was given by Queen Rani of Jordan. And essentially much of what she said is what she's been saying in the last couple of weeks on CNN, so many of you will have seen her. But she talked about the plight of the Palestinians. It's a difficult listen for our delegates from Israel and for our Jewish delegates, no question. But we felt that as we had been invited to be in Belfast for the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, that this was one of the ongoing things and work of peace that needed to be done. We also had a speech for the ages, which we'll be publishing soon, from President Santos of Colombia, on how he created and delivered the peace agreement in Colombia. And I urge you, university students, I urge you to look at that speech. It is the masterclass, because he learned from all the previous peace agreements all around the world, studied his subject, former Minister of Defense, had been killing FARC people, and it was he who created the peace. Peace is possible, but peace is hard work. We now know from the NGOs that we work with in Israel and also in Gaza and the West Bank, a form of almost total despair, a terrible, terrible despair. One of the representatives of the Parents Circle, which works with families both in Palestine and in Israel, said to me, and it was repeated again in a radio recording, the bodies of our children, our dead children, cry out to us for peace. So when we talk today of China and the United States, and Ms. Barshefsky, I think since I was at university 100 years ago, I haven't taken as many notes as I took when you were speaking. So thank you all for that, for the work that you're doing. This China-United States situation, these are the powers in the world. Let's just call it what it is. These are the superpowers. And the work of reconciliation and negotiation and dialogue between them is the future of our kind and certainly of our young people. I take so seriously these words, that competition leading to this overwhelming sense of it has to be confrontational, it has to be aggressive. No, it doesn't. No, it absolutely doesn't. And this work for China and United States, so serious, and for our young ones. So we at One Young World, we have a large delegation every year at the summits from China. We also have a big delegation, of course, from the United States. So I commit here on behalf of my organization, with James's help, we will try to ensure that these delegations are carrying on your work, are doing this talking, getting to know each other, understand each other, not judge each other, work together, because frankly, our lives depend on it. So the scholarship that has been put together here by James, John, Andy, for these young leaders to become part of the One Young World family and community and part for their lives is serious work. They have a chance to work together with leaders, and they work towards the Sustainable Development Goals. And we measure, Neil was asking me earlier about our impact. Our impact reports are on our website, and the latest one from last year, from 2022, is 210 pages, so I know you won't be reading it. However, the community have had an impact on 41.5 million people thus far, and we don't have 2023's measurements. This is done conservatively and carefully, because we try always to teach that no one values what they can't measure. So that's on the Sustainable Development Goals. We know the truth is today, because of the conflicts and the pandemic, on many of the targets we are going backwards. So there is work to be done. But I particularly, personally, on behalf of One Young World, community worldwide, I'm sure, want to commit to this China-US exchange. It is vital. And I give my heartfelt thanks to CUSEF for the scholarship for these 8 very, very fortunate young leaders soon to join us. The scholarship is being launched. It's for open application. The shortlist will be sent to you, James, and to CUSEF for you to decide exactly who those people are. And I know that these young leaders that you select, you will be hearing from them. And would just say to you today, just close with the words of Sir Bob Geldof, who always gave me and Kofi Annan such a very hard time at One Young World. We are the world. We are the children. We are the ones who make a brighter day. So let's start giving. It's a choice we're making. We're saving our own lives. And it's true, we make a better day. Thank you.
Thanks so much to Kate. As we said, it's launched officially today, and we're expecting, I think, maybe over 1,000 applications or something from around the world. At least Kate says, not only in the traditional areas of collaboration between the US and China, but in the full areas. We've got gender equality, mental health, all these other areas that are equally important, and not just referring to disabilities and so on and so forth. Thank you very much, Kate, for being with us, and we're going to hear more from you tomorrow during the Global Challenges panel. Ning Zizhe is Vice Chairman of the China Center for International Economic Exchanges, the group that jointly organizes the Hong Kong Forum. He's also Vice Director of the Economic Committee of the 13th National Committee of the CPPCC, the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference. For 12 years, Dr. Ning was Deputy Director and then Director of the State Council Research Office. And after leaving that role, he was a Deputy Director of the National Development and Reform Commission and President of the National Statistical Society of China. Dr. Ning and Mr.毕井泉, thank you so much for helping us put this very important gathering together. And we always look forward to working with you through the year and every year because you help make so many things possible with CUSEF. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ning Zizhe.
I will speak in Chinese. Please be ready. 尊敬的赵主席、周总裁、毕理事长、各位嘉宾，大家下午好。很高兴能够参加香港中美论坛。论坛的主题是“变局与进展”，很有意义。当今世界很不安宁，百年变局加速演进。世纪疫情影响深远，世界经济增长放缓，通货膨胀仍在高位，债务负担持续加重，气候变化风雨无常，局部冲突矛盾加剧，乌克兰危机仍在发酵，巴以冲突又趋激烈。同时，和平发展合作仍是世界潮流。中美关系作为世界上最重要的双边关系，传来的信息也是喜忧参半，是吧？喜的是去年11月印尼巴厘岛习拜会半年多后，近几个月中美关系出现了止跌企稳的势头。几个月来，刚才大家都讲到，中国韩正王毅等领导人和部长访美，美国布林肯等政府官员，还有是吧，议长，这个多数党领袖，州长，还有基辛格、比尔盖茨，也是接连访华。那么中美的地方关系和民间关系呢，都得到了高度的重视。人员往来和直飞的航班明显增多，特别是吧，大家都期盼着两国元首能够在旧金山会晤。同时呢，忧的是美国也不断出台对华投资的限制，先进制程芯片的补充限制，更多的企业被纳入了制裁名单，并且最近还延长了涉华企业紧急状态令，双边贸易和投资受阻。美国议会反华和干预中国内政的议案，是吧？也不少。美军舰军机也经常到台海、南海巡弋。在这种情况下，如何珍惜减忧，推动中美关系朝着稳定、协调、可持续的方向发展，真正实现相互尊重、和平共处、互利共赢，必须针对存在的问题，加强宏观政策、贸易政策、产业与投资政策的沟通协调。因为我主要从经济上面政策的沟通协调谈一谈我的看法。一，针对经济物价不稳的问题，加强中美宏观政策的沟通协调。发展是解决世界上诸多难题的钥匙。遗憾的是，后疫情时代全球增长的步伐持续放缓。据 IMF 最新数据显示，世界经济年增长率今年 预测值为3%，2024年预测值为2.9%，低于去年3.5%的估计值，比2021年的6.3%跌了一半还多。世界贸易量的年增长率，今年的预测值只有0.9%，是2021年10.9%的不到1/10。世界经济从整体上看，仍然缺乏动力。同时，高通胀的乌云仍然密布，全球消费者的价格上涨率，今年平均呢将达到6.9%。中美作为世界上前2大经济体，稳增长、稳物价，对全球都至关重要。已经过去的3季度，中国经济恢复前3季度恢复向好。这个前3季度是达到了5.2%，3季度本身同比增长率达到了4.9%。美国3季度经济增长也超预期，环比折年率同样达到4.9%。2个4.9%，是吧？应该说都是这个可喜的变化。当然，中国经济呢，今年在这个前3季度5.2%的基础上，全年呢有望实现5%以上的经济增长率。随着最近一系列这个组合式的政策出台，明年经济增长率呢也有望，是吧，保持较好的这个水平。但是也要看到，美国经济的物价水平仍然比较高，对吧？债务水平也比较高，抵消了经济增长带来的一些好处，是吧？明年经济这个物价通货膨胀率能否降到2%，是吧？同时保持合理的增长率，是吧？还需要这个观察。那么中国经济，那么也存在着这个相反的问题，就是物价，是吧，偏低。那么刚刚公布的10月份的这个物价环比是负增长，是吧？这也不利于企业增产增收，这个所以双方都存在着稳增长的同时稳物价的问题。这就需要加强双方在宏观政策上的沟通与交流协调。2017年以前刚才毕理事长说到，我们各个部门跟美国部门的之间有100多个部级和司局级的协调机制，经济部门就有好几十个，是吧？协调机制。如中国国家发改委与美国国务院呢，就有经济发展与改革的对话等机制，是吧？而现在双方的财经部门呢，也只有，是吧？最近刚刚恢复的经济、金融、商业，是吧？刚才美国驻华大使还讲到，是吧？其他几个6个这个工作组，这几天中美，是吧？经济金融的对话即将在美国举办，期望以此为契机，扩大双方交流、沟通、协调的广度和深度，是吧？以协调大国之间的宏观政策方向和重点，促进各自经济合理增长，发挥中美作为全球经济领头羊的作用，推动整个世界经济恢复繁荣。2，针对进出口下降的问题，加强中美贸易政策的沟通协调。中美经贸关系是整个中美关系稳定的基础，是吧？这个应该说既有压舱石的作用，又有润滑剂的这个作用。过去44年，中美货物贸易额 年均增长14%左右。2020年1月，双方达成第一阶段贸易协议后，是吧？我参加了这次这个中美贸易谈判。中美的贸易额呢，连续3年保持正增长，是吧？2022年，中国货物进出口总额按中方统计是接近7600亿美元，按美方统计也有6900多亿美元，达到历史新高。这就给两国人民带来了实实在在的好处，也彰显了两国经济和产业结构的互补性。但是今年以来，在全球贸易放缓的背景下，中美贸易1至9月同比下降14%，10月份又下降了7.6%。这里有经济因素的影响，也有非经济因素的影响，比如筑墙设垒脱钩断链，这个产业回流、有岸外包、境岸外包等行为，贸易行为泛政治化、泛安全化，危害极大。尽管如此，中国的出口占全球市场的份额，今年以来不降反升。据 WTO 统计，今年1季度和2季度，中国出口在全球出口中所占的份额分别为13.8%，对吧？14.0%，上升了0.29和0.53个百分点。一些中国商品从其他国家，是吧，间接出口到美国。这也说明中国贸易市场多元化取得了进展，也说明中美直接贸易还有很大潜力可挖。我们希望看到更多美国官员和商人前来参加中国内地和香港的各类展会，就像前几天美国农业部官员和多个农业协会代表参加上海进博会一样，促进更多美国商品的销售。在此有3个个人的呼吁吧。一是呼吁美国政府取消对中国，是吧，多达3000多亿美元出口商品加征的关税，这可以使美国的这个通胀率、消费价格降低1.3个百分点。那么，美国9月份的通胀率同比就是上升3.7%，这个1.3个降下来就到了2.4%，接近2%的理想目标了，可以免除通胀之忧。二是呼吁美国政府取消对1300多家中国企业列入实体清单的做法，这可以使这个两国商品企业这个销售交流无阻。三是呼吁美国政府取消对中国光伏产品的双反等多种限制措施，这可以使美国发展可再生能源，降低成本，加快进度。三，针对经济调整转型中的问题，加强中美产业与投资政策的沟通协调。当今世界以数字技术为代表的新一轮科技革命和产业变革深入发展，应对气变成为国际共识。应对新冠疫情等公共卫生突发事件，也是引起全球行动，这些都会给人类生产生活方式带来深刻转型，同时带来经济结构和产业结构的巨大调整变化。中美两国既是世界上数一数二的数字经济大国，又是世界上数一数二的能源生产和消费大国，同时也是碳排放的大国，还是世界上数一数二的生物经济发展大国。在全球经济及产业结构调整转型中，是吧？目前是走在前列的。推动产业的数字化、绿色化、生物化转型， 需要在全球范围内优化配置资源要素和生产能力，需要调动和利用几十万亿乃至更多的投资资金。只有扩大国际交流合作，才能取得实际成效。对中国的高端芯片、人工智能、量子信息实行投资限制是一种短视行为，损人而不利己。对中国企业投资于美国信息通讯、新能源实行限制，也是他残且自残的行为。最好的办法还是双方坐下来，就产业与投资政策进行对话。美方有重要人士提出新华盛顿共识，主张重新认识并应用产业政策，这不无道理。市场化基础上的产业政策，不应是排他性的，是吧？而应当是公平竞争的、功能性的，是吧？更不能把是吧一些毒丸条款呢写在法律文件中。当前，中国正在推进新型工业化，美国正在推进再工业化，在新一代信息技术产业化、生物技术产业化、光伏产业、新能源汽车产业、绿色投资等领域，及时开展两国产业与投资政策的对话是必要的，是吧？我们也得知，即将在美国也交流沟通产业补贴等问题，谈比不谈要好。在此，我也有3个呼吁：一是呼吁美方取消对中国企业和金融机构在美投资兴业的限制；二是呼吁美方取消对美国企业和金融机构在华投资一些产业的限制；三是呼吁美国企业和金融机构留在中国，是吧？这个全球第2大市场，还正在不断发展扩大的市场，是吧？植根发展，是吧？留在香港植根发展。世界经济仍然是一个整体，世界经济好，中国经济就好；中国经济好，世界经济也就会好。让我们共同努力争取一个好的世界经济，好的中美关系。谢谢大家。
Thank you very much to Dr. Ning Jizhe. Shyam Saran was Foreign Secretary of India and the Prime Minister's Special Envoy for Nuclear Affairs and Climate Change, as well as Ambassador to Indonesia, Myanmar, and Nepal. After leaving government, he headed the Research and Information System for Developing Countries, a renowned think tank focusing on economic issues, and as chairman of the National Security Advisory Board under the National Security Council. His first book, How India Sees the World, was followed by How China Sees India and the World. Please welcome Secretary Shyam Saran.
Good afternoon. At the outset, I would like to thank the China-US Exchange Foundation and its president, James Chow, the China Center for International Economic Exchanges and its chairman, John Chow, as also the China Center for International Economic Exchanges and its executive vice chairman, Bijing Chuan Xianshan, for extending this very cordial invitation to me to participate in the Hong Kong Forum on US-China relations. I must confess that I feel a bit like an interloper in this conversation, perhaps even as an eavesdropper. But since the state of China-US relations, as we have heard each speaker say, are so important to the rest of the world, Perhaps I can look forward to understanding the nuances of the relationship from a most impressive cast of speakers here at this forum. Of course, from India's standpoint, if you ask me, how do we look at China-US relations, we have a very simple formula, which is that we do not like US-China collusion, but we don't like US-China confrontation either. So it is in that space where India wishes to operate. What can I contribute to the improvement of US-China relations from an Indian perspective? Because at least that is the theme of this particular forum. Well, to the extent that India figures in the US-China relationship, perhaps I could help by mitigating, if not removing, the India factor from negatively affecting the relationship. There is an American commentary warning that the US cannot rely upon India as a partner if a conflict broke out between US and China, for example, over Taiwan. But this does not reassure our Chinese friends, who sometimes think that India has already gone over to the dark side. If you put these two prevalent perceptions side by side, it should be obvious that India is not going anywhere in either direction. Our policies are driven by our interests, which at this juncture is to achieve as early as possible the economic and social development of our people. In this context, our partnership with the US is indispensable, as it is with the European Union, with Japan. These are the partners who may be perceived perhaps by some as being in relative decline, but they remain the chief repositories of high technology, of capital, as well as major markets for India. China itself has benefited from these partnerships in the past, and it's therefore, perhaps it should understand what India is confronting at this point of time from its own experience. In fact, even today, China does not wish to decouple from the US and the West. Why should it expect this of India? There was a time when China looked upon India as an economic opportunity and convinced India to look upon China as a great economic opportunity. However, in recent years, our sense is that China has been looking at India through the prism of its prevailing relationship with the US. And to some extent, the US too looks upon its relations with many other countries also through the prism of its relationship with China. And I think the less we had of that kind of prism operating on both countries, if they realize that there is a world beyond their own very important relationship, perhaps they may be able to get along somewhat better. Now, as I said, part of the problem as we perceive it is that China looks upon India through its prism, through the prism of its relations with the US. There were problems between India and China in the past, even at the border, but these were always managed very successfully through a whole series of mechanisms both countries were committed to deal with these kind of difficulties. And always the relationship, therefore, over the last 40 years or so until recently, remained actually on an even keel. But today, perhaps because of the prism that I mentioned, there may be less of the accommodative spirit of the past, which kept peace at the borders over the last 40 years. A couple of years back, at a conference in Beijing, a vice foreign minister of China commenting upon the tensions between US and China, held India-China relations as a model of how mature countries who may have serious differences between them can actually manage their relations. And so India-China relations was actually held up as a model for other countries to follow. Perhaps, I would like to just say at the end that it is that maybe sense of maturity which needs to be brought back, not only to China-US relations, but also I would hope to India-China relations as well. Let me leave you with that thought. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Secretary Saran. We forgot to say that you lived in Hong Kong, I think on mid-level, so 3 years, where you were studying Chinese, when you were posted here, I think, at one time in your diplomatic career. We should have asked you to have done the speech in Chinese. We have time for it now. CUSEF works year-round with special partners, including 2 presidential legacies, the Carter Center and the George H.W. Bush Foundation for US-China relations. Another partner we also hold in high personal regard is Max Baucus, the longest-serving senator from the US state of Montana and appointed by President Barack Obama as ambassador to China. Over the past 15 years, CUSEF has brought more than 2,000 US students to China, including 800 from the HBCUs, the historically black colleges and universities. Earlier this year, we had the privilege of working with the Baucus Institute to bring a group of Montana students to Hong Kong, Beijing, and Shanghai, the very first US college delegation to visit China since this very, very long pandemic. He is a champion of people-to-people exchanges and of promoting growing prosperity by removing trade barriers. We're so happy that after being with us in June, you can be with us again. Please welcome Ambassador Max Baucus.
Thank you, James, very much. Thank CUSEF. Thank CEIIC. I guess that's where you are. Thank you all very, very much. I'm really impressed with the degree to which CUSEF and your sister organization have really stepped up. The standards are even higher today than before. More deeply engaged, more honestly addressing questions, partly because the issues are more challenging, but you're stepping up to the challenge. I thank you very, very much. We all agree what needs to be done. There's not much disagreement here at all. The next question is, well, how do we do it? How do we get stuff done? How do we get the agreements that we want? How do we work with China, with all other countries? That's really the question we're all facing here. Before I get into that, though, I want to just add a little dose of reality. This is not going to be easy. I don't want to overstate the degree to which China is toxic in America. And the same is probably pretty much true in America is toxic in China. There is virtually no member of the United States Congress who will stand up on the floor of the Senate or the House and say anything constructive about the relationship. No one. No one. I speak to my friends privately in the Congress, gee, why isn't there someone? Is there some idea? How do we get some dialogue going? Nada, nowhere at all. A lot of Americans are really worried about China. It's basically the old Thucydides question, rising power, established power. We Americans kind of think, well, gee, we're kind of preferred. You know, we're the largest country. We basically set up these institutions post-World War II that are ours. China did, we did. We pride ourselves on our rule of law, independent judiciary, our Declaration of Independence, and our Constitution. We think we're pretty big stuff. We tend to think the world should follow, to be honest. And we really don't recognize the degree to which other countries, are just like us. They're equal. People in other countries have the same hopes and desires as do Americans. Have a decent income, food on the table, take care of their kids, decent education for their kids, clean air and clean water, decent health care, maybe be left alone a little bit, pursue their dreams. We're all the same. Americans really quite don't fully understand that yet. In China, I think the main concern is, as has been stated here, because of mostly driven by national security, which is sort of a smokescreen for some of the local indigenous innovation that Charlene and others have talked about. The Chinese think, this is my impression, that the United States is trying to stop China's rise. I asked that question, many of my friends in China, do you think the United States is trying to stop China's rise? Absolutely. I hear that in spades. Correspondingly, other side of the coin, Americans think that China wants to be the hegemon in Southeast Asia, say by the end of this decade, or maybe farther. General Mark Milley, about a month ago, he's a former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, on a TV program, just flat out said, China wants to be the regional hegemon by middle part of this decade, and wants to be maybe push farther and be maybe the world hegemon by mid-century. He said that publicly, strongly. Now, why did he say that? We must have some reasons, I don't know. But at the very least, he gives cover to the hawks of the United States, which is very, very powerful. Most members of Congress want to get reelected. How do you get reelected? You do what the people back home want. And right now, it's so easy to blame China. It's very, very easy. It's very easy for China to blame the United States. Recently, my wife and I were in Shanghai, met a couple friends in China who just basically given up. Said, we've given up the United States. We don't know what to do. It's just, we're not getting anywhere. We're stuck, and the relationship is really deteriorating. Fortunately, and many have talked about it today, it looks like maybe we might be reaching a plateau. Maybe we're not going to sink much farther. What is that? That's all the meetings back and forth between the United States and China, Secretary Mondo, Secretary Yellen, Secretary Blinken, you name it, back and forth. And that's really constructive. I want to just report a little bit about the Schumer meeting. I spent some time with former Ambassador Jin Gong, who frankly I like a lot. Don't know what happened, but that's not the issue here. And he was really working with me to try to work on this relationship. Very hard. Lots of very good questions. And his successor, Ambassador Xiafeng, is the same. Really good guy. I was very impressed with the statement here today. He clearly cares. He really is stepping up a little bit, and I just want to thank him very much for that. But when I talked to Secretary Burns, Secretary Burns told me how hard he worked to make sure the Schumer delegation, when it came to China, worked. And when I talked to Ambassador Xia, we said the same thing. There a lot of work went into making sure that when that congressional delegation came to Beijing a few weeks ago, that it was very positive. When I was serving as ambassador, a couple of delegations would come over, but no way could I get the leadership to meet with my delegation. Maybe they could meet with the Commerce Minister, maybe they could meet with some of the high-level people, not at all with President Xi. This group, and I've talked to them, they're very impressed. This group met with President Xi for 80 minutes. And they met with other top officials for the same length of time. Add to that, each of the leaders was very well prepared. They knew their brief. They asked lots of very good questions. They made very good points. That was not the case when I had delegations to come over. Those were just formal talking points. talking past each other. This one was real. Add to that, the members of the delegation I've talked to said that the Chinese were really cordial and really friendly. It's clear there's some kind of a charm offensive going on here. There's no doubt about it. Both sides worked really hard for these trips back and forth, the delegation, congressional delegation. Add to that the Shanghai CCIEE conference just a few days ago. Huge success. More people attended that than the previous conferences, for example. President Xi is going to have over 300, 400 people, businessmen, meet with him personally after he meets with President Biden in San Francisco. There's lots of efforts both sides are putting together to try to help put a floor on this relationship. It's really impressive, frankly. At least that, talking to both the people I mentioned. One member of the delegation was afraid to come over. He said, gee, I'm a Republican. You know, I'll be pilloried by my party if I go over. But the lead Republican is, a guy named Mike Crapo, and this other senator said, well, gee, Mike, if you're going, I guess I can go too. But they were afraid, two Republican senators were very afraid to come over, but at least they did. Some good bit of progress there. I talked to one of those senators later after he came back. He said, you know, Max, I learned a lot in that trip. He said, you know, I learned China's not going to go anywhere. We're always going to have to deal with China. And, you know, hey, you take what you can get. And we start talking. We had a long conversation about China. And he wants to follow up with me when I get back to Washington, D.C. So there's things are kind of moving ahead a little bit here. My concern, however, is what follows after San Francisco. Remember, Bali was people kind of felt good about Bali. Bali didn't work out too well for a couple of three reasons in my judgment. One is when leaders meet, and they want to work together and so forth, nice sounding statements, but then they go home and they face the local politics at home. They got so much to do at home. It just takes so much time. Both Xi and Biden, I think, face that same problem. And then, of course, the big problem is after Bali, the balloon. We got to have. So after San Francisco, we can't have any more balloons. We can't have any more mistakes. And we can't be critical of the other. And we can't undertake actions, negative actions, which underline what we agreed to at San Francisco. Post-Bali, the United States, acted more export controls. China started to, under international security laws, started to corral some people in China as well. We can't let that happen. And when I talk to Ambassador Xi and others, I make that point as strong as I can. I met with Vice Premier Hu Lifeng just a few 4 days ago. That's my main point to him. Just make sure your government, because I'm telling the same thing to my government, don't do anything stupid after San Francisco. Let's keep things going here. Which leads to my next point. It's kind of trite, but in my judgment, it is so important. And that is really honest, continued communication. Vice Premier He told me that, gee, we have these working groups set up. I've seen Raimondo and others, and Wang Wentao, for example. Well, that's fine. I've been part of more working groups than I like to shake a stick at. They're boring, they're dull. Not much ever really happens. So I said to him, make sure these working groups are real, not just turn the crank formalities, but they got to be real, honest. And I said, Mr. Vice Premier, get on the phone, call up Secretary, say, hey, Janet, what about this? Or call up Secretary Mondo, hey, Gina, what about that? I mean, be honest, direct, it's informal, and just start talking a little bit. And it's really important that we do so much more of that. When I was serving as ambassador, I tried to get work delegations to come over to China. We got a few, but it was really, really hard. And obviously, since Trump was elected, the door closed, and there's not much communication. It's really important for us to get it back. And I really want to thank our youth program, all you kids here get involved, because the more we talk, clearly, the better. So thank you so very much for what you're doing. When I was serving too, I tried to get conversations to be really candid, be honest. I'd be sitting across the table from somebody, a senior minister, he'd have his talkers prepared by his crack staff. I'd have my talkers prepared by my crack staff. It was boring. Nothing happened. And so I was rude. I would just interrupt mid-sentence. And I'd say, Mr. Minister, that's very interesting. Can you give me an example of that? Can you explain that a little more fully to get him off his talkers? And guess what? They liked it. They liked the candor. They did not have to go through their talkers all the time. Now, they said some of the same things, but still it was progress. And when cabinet secretaries would come over, I'd make the same point to them: be honest, be direct, don't be too nice, ask questions, be constructive, don't be personal, ask good, positive questions, and, oh, you think that okay? Yeah, yeah. And they just, it's something I'm just trying to encourage us to do much more of. So I'll finish just a couple of points here. I just can't overemphasize just honest, real communication. You know, Charlene Barshefsky had a good idea with these formal compacts. I can't quite understand I don't quite know what it all is, Charlene. But I've got an idea too. It's kind of nuts, but it sure work if it were to occur. I think President Biden and President Xi should meet quarterly. Lock it in. We're going to meet every quarter, and when we meet, it's not just going to be a drive-by. It's going to be a couple, 3 days, and with few people in the room as possible, so you get to talk to each other, get to know each other a little bit. And after 2, 3, or 4 of these, you know, things might start to get a little better, work out a little more positively. We have to get this relationship straightened out. We know we have to. We have no choice. We have to do our best. I have a kind of another corny construct. This is what it is. I think the world global tectonic economic shifts have caused this relationship. Rising power, established power, U.S., China. Neither country is going anywhere. China's always going to be here. U.S. is always going to be here. Neither country can get off the globe. We're here. So we got to figure out some way to kind of get along with each other. So my construct is this. It's like an arranged marriage. The global forces, geopolitical, have just arranged this relationship. It's here. It's not a marriage based on love. We clearly don't love each other. But it's an arranged marriage. And we're stuck. Neither country can get off this globe. We're here. There's no divorce. We're here. So the real question is, do we try to, in this arranged marriage, do we try to accommodate each other or not? And obviously, the more we accommodate, because we're not going anywhere, the more it's probably going to work out pretty well. So I'll just stop there and say thanks so much. And just in the spirit of C.H. Tung, let's really go the extra mile, do all the things that we know we have to do, because this is not rocket science. This is pretty basic, what we know we have to do. Just get started and make it happen. Thank you very much.
Well, the people outside this room may not love each other, but all of us here in this room do. Thank you very much, Max. We're going to just have one more speaker, and then a few of us have an engagement outside. We're going to move to that. So we are delighted to have our final speaker today. Bernard Schwartländer is the Global Health Envoy for Germany. He's a physician and a virologist, and he has an unparalleled reputation in the field of global health, including health emergencies. He was head of Germany's HIV/AIDS program during the worst years of the global epidemic, and he was chef de cabinet and assistant director general under Dr. Tedros during COVID-19 at the World Health Organization. Now, he knows America, he knows China, he's worked at the World Bank, he led the country offices for WHO and UNAIDS in Beijing, and apart from working for Dr. Tedros, he worked for Margaret Chan before him. And he was also in Europe as a key figure at the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB, malaria, which I think came out of the G7 meetings originally. It's an organization that invests more than $4 billion annually to defeat the 3 diseases. He set up the WHO Hub for Pandemic and Epidemic Intelligence. That's going to help us prepare and protect the world from global disease threats. And that hub is in Berlin. It was opened up by Dr. Tedros. And in one of her last commitments before retiring from office by German Chancellor Angela Merkel, we welcome to Hong Kong and to the Hong Kong Forum Dr. Bernhard Schwartländer.
Thank you, James. Chairman John Zhao, Executive Vice Mayor Chairman Bing Jiangchuan, an old friend from my previous times in WHO in Beijing. I have the somewhat difficult task to be the last speaker after such an incredible, discourse that we have just heard from the ambassador. And I've been told by James that I should be very short. So I try to reshuffle the thoughts that I had, because I also know that we are here for the next day, and there will be more time for interactions. And I hope, and I feel already very inspired, I must say, and then I come to that later. And I hope that we will have plenty of time to continue these discussions and follow on the stage that has been set. All of you have spoken in different ways how the world is in disorder in so many ways. And clearly, as also the ambassador and others have just said, nothing is more important in these times than dialogue. Being together, listening, exclamation mark, and thinking together, and thinking and basically taking up our responsibility that our children and grandchildren and those following have a place where they can live and thrive. So many of us have spoken about the challenges we have with clashing systems, new powers challenging the established world orders. We are in shock, and I speak as a European here, we are in shock with the violent wars that broke out in different parts of the world, which is something that I could have not imagined, and people of my generation could not have imagined it would ever happen again in Europe. But with all the difference that we see these days, there are areas where we have a common ground, and where people, no matter where they live, are the same and feel the same and think the same. And I've dedicated my professional life to the health of people as a public health professional. I've worked most part of my professional career in the United Nations system in all parts of the world, and I've learned to see diversity and being different as an incredible value and opportunity. The pandemic that we sort of left behind, it's not quite gone, but we hope it is gone, has taught us many lessons, and most importantly, we have seen that we are connected across continents and national borders. Decoupling and the like may work for politicians and economists in a short-sighted view, but it will not work for viruses. Any attempts to interfere with science and collective action made things worse in terms of health, lives, and ultimately, I want to postulate, also in terms of economies. The pandemic has also reminded us that health must ultimately be at the center point of all action. If we think about pandemics, we need to think more than viruses and pathogens. We need to think about the health of the planet. Never before has the concept of planetary health shown to be more palpable, more meaningful, and more relevant. The health of human civilization and the natural systems on which it depends. Never before it has become more clear that despite all the efforts of scientists, policymakers, and politicians, the global community has failed to truly connect the dots and collectively and decisively act to stop global warming, protect the environment, and ensure equitable access to health for everybody. Floods, drought, ice caps, and glaciers melting at record speed are alarming signs of the threat to the natural systems on which human civilization depends. Unhealthy lifestyles across all regions and cultures of the world are now a leading risk factor for ill health and premature death across all cultures and civilizations. Rapid urbanization and cultivation of land for agriculture use fundamentally changed the natural habitat of animals, both threatening the biodiversity of the planet as well as altering the way humans and animals interact, with new health risks such as increases in vector-borne diseases, threats through new viral diseases in mankind, including MERS, SARS, and of course, Corona. Let me give you a personal thought that sort of occurred to me, especially over the last weeks. Since I was a teenager, I recall the creation of Earth Day and later the slogan, "Save the Planet." I realized suddenly that this is almost arrogant. The planet will survive. The planet has time to recover. It's our civilization, it's our lives that are at stake, and nothing less. If that is not a call for action to come together and think differently, to talk together and find the solutions, I wouldn't know what. It is, when it comes to health of our civilization, the health of natural systems, this is where everybody is the same, where everybody has the same interest, no matter where people live. And this is important. As we are in a time of dispute, of not listening, not talking to each other, as we have just discussed, it is so important that we find and culture areas of common ground where we are actually together, where we don't fight to start with. And I want to postulate, and I liked, that some of you had very clear recommendations. These are 1, 2, 3 things you want to do. I want to recommend that we should look at health, environment, and the nexus of health and environment as the one common element, possibly the last language that we all have together, the same language that we speak. Work together and live on that, because I do believe that it's much easier to quarrel in areas where we have disagreement if we have at least a strong basis where we do agree and can move together. Let me close with a sort of personal thought as a German. We have this saying that, throwing garbage over the fence. And what that means is they're neighbors, and they get, they start to struggle about stupid things. One, the tree is too high, the tree is too low, the car is too big, or whatever. So they start to throw stuff over the fence. So the neighbor throws the stuff back, and then eventually they throw the barbecue over the fence, and the big barbecue comes back. And that's just completely, utterly stupid. We all know that. That's why I think, unless we, go back and say, actually, we all like barbecue. Let's have barbecue together and talk about it. What can we do about the tree? And that's how I feel with health, with environment. Let's find that basis. Let's talk to each other. And let's have a decent discussion. Let's find the basis for a decent discussion and move forward. I do feel inspired already today. I'm an optimist because as long as I have hope for change, I will always be optimistic. I get up in the morning and say, that's what I have to do to get there. Today gives me hope and strengthens my optimism. So I look forward for this evening and tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bernard. And just for the record, I didn't ask you to be quick. I said just don't be the longest. Don't be that person. So thank you very, very much. It's wonderful that we have health embedded into this high-level plenary here, because the brutal lessons the last few years have taught us about the real risks when we let arrogance overcome us and allow that to dictate the course and trajectory of the world. We are going to close for today. We're going to ask you to use the same badges for re-entry tomorrow, so you won't need to register again. Your SI interpretation headsets, please could you leave it on your chairs and desks. And a quick preview for tomorrow. We'll start off with Dr. Victor Fong. He's going to lead the Trade and Economy panel with Myron Brilliant, Stephen Roach, and P.T. Yao. And then we'll have panels on science and tech, people-to-people exchanges, global challenges, and also international finance. And 2 new roundtables on geopolitics and international security and the future of Hong Kong. And we're so excited that many of our governors will be involved tomorrow as well as a special address by Muhammad Yunus, the Nobel Peace Prize winner. Anybody here wearing a blue lanyard, please can you just stay where you are, pack up your things, and we're going to move you in one direction together. CUSEF and CCIEE, thanks you for being here. We'll see you tomorrow from 8:30 a.m. for registration, 9 a.m. start. Thank you.